The Brewster F-2A Buffalo. Aviation historians once called it one of the most promising fighters of the early war years. The U.S. Navy's first monoplane fighter, fast, maneuverable, heavily armed. It was supposed to dominate the Pacific skies, but the truth, it became known as the Flying Coffin. In one battle, Finnish pilots achieved incredible kill ratios with it, while American and British pilots faced catastrophic losses. What happened? Today, we're separating myth from reality in one of aviation's most misunderstood stories. The Brewster F-2A Buffalo entered service in 1939 as America's technological leap forward. It was the U.S. Navy's answer to modern air combat, replacing outdated biplanes with a sleek, all-metal monoplane. When it first flew, aviation magazines praised its innovative design. The Buffalo featured a powerful Wright Cyclone engine, 4 machine guns, and a top speed that exceeded 300 miles per hour. For its time, this was cutting-edge technology. The Navy ordered it with confidence. Allied nations, including Britain, Belgium, and the Netherlands, quickly placed their own orders. Finland purchased 44 aircraft. On paper, the Buffalo looked like a winner. Brewster Aircraft Corporation's promotional materials painted an impressive picture. Their brochures showcased the Buffalo's advanced features, the 2-stage supercharger, the retractable landing gear, and the robust airframe. Official Navy photographs showed pristine aircraft lined up on carrier decks, representing American air power. Newsreels from 1940 featured the Buffalo as a symbol of preparedness. The company's advertisements appeared in major publications, claiming superior climb rate and excellent maneuverability. Government contracts validated these claims. The message was clear. America had a world-class fighter. Early aviation histories, particularly those written during or immediately after the war, treated the Buffalo with cautious optimism. Some texts highlighted its role as a stepping stone in American fighter development. The aircraft appeared in official Navy histories as the bridge between biplane and modern monoplane fighters. Popular aviation encyclopedias listed its specifications alongside contemporary aircraft, suggesting comparable capability. Museums displayed Buffalo replicas as examples of pre-war American aviation technology. The narrative positioned it as an honest attempt at modernization that simply arrived at an unfortunate moment in history. Among aviation enthusiasts today, 2 contradictory myths exist. Some remember the Buffalo only as a complete failure, a death trap that doomed its pilots. Others point to the Finnish Air Force's remarkable success, claiming the Buffalo was actually excellent when properly used. Online forums debate whether it was the aircraft or the circumstances that determined outcomes. Scale model manufacturers continue producing Buffalo kits, keeping interest alive. Vintage aircraft enthusiasts occasionally restore examples for museums. The confusion persists. Was it good or bad? Here's where the myth gets complicated. In Finnish hands, the Buffalo achieved legendary status. During the continuation war against the Soviet Union, Finnish pilots flying Buffaloes claimed a kill ratio of 32-1. Ace pilot Hans Wind personally scored 39 victories in a Buffalo. These weren't propaganda numbers, they were documented kills. Finnish pilots loved the aircraft, calling it reliable and effective. This success story spread worldwide, suggesting the Buffalo was actually an excellent fighter. But there's a critical detail. These victories occurred under very specific circumstances that weren't typical of Buffalo operations elsewhere. The Finnish success created lasting confusion. How could the same aircraft be both excellent and terrible? National pride played a role too. Americans wanted to believe their pre-war designs weren't completely inadequate. The Buffalo's failure was easier to blame on circumstances rather than fundamental flaws. Additionally, detailed combat records remained classified for decades, preventing thorough analysis. The myth filled the information gap. Let's examine the numbers that tell the real story. In Pacific combat under American and British command, the Buffalo's record was disastrous. During the Battle of Midway in June 1942, Marine Corps VMF-221 flew 19 Buffaloes against Japanese attackers. 13 were shot down. 2 pilots survived. That's a 68% loss rate in a single engagement. The squadron commander specifically reported the Buffalo was not suitable for combat. In British Commonwealth service, the statistics were equally grim. During the defense of Singapore and Malaya in late 1941 and early 1942, RAF and Royal Australian Air Force Buffalo squadrons faced overwhelming Japanese air superiority. Squadron 243 and 488 suffered catastrophic losses. Of approximately 150 Buffaloes deployed to defend Singapore, fewer than 20 survived the campaign. Most were destroyed in air combat, though some were lost to bombing on the ground. The kill-to-loss ratio was approximately 1-5, meaning Buffaloes were shot down 5 times more often than they scored kills. Dutch Buffalo squadrons in the East Indies experienced similar disasters. Within weeks of combat, their small Buffalo force was virtually eliminated. Mission abort rates were high due to mechanical failures and combat damage. When pilots did engage, they found themselves consistently outmatched. Now, let's compare the Buffalo directly with its contemporaries and opponents. Against the Mitsubishi A6M0, the Buffalo was comprehensively outclassed. The Zero had a maximum speed of 331 miles per hour compared to the Buffalo's 313 miles per hour in operational configuration. More critically, the Zero could climb to 20,000 feet in 7 minutes. The Buffalo required nearly 10 minutes. In turning combat, the Zero's lighter wing loading gave it a devastating advantage. Pilots reported they simply couldn't outturn Japanese fighters. The Buffalo's claimed top speed of 321 miles per hour was achievable only in factory-clean condition. Once operational equipment was added, armor plate, self-sealing fuel tanks, additional ammunition, and tropical survival gear, weight increased from 4,750 pounds to over 6,000 pounds. This extra weight reduced speed, climb rate, and maneuverability significantly. The Buffalo that entered combat was not the Buffalo that passed factory tests. Range was another critical weakness. The Buffalo's combat radius was approximately 200 miles, severely limiting tactical options. Contemporary American fighters like the P-40 Warhawk, while not superior in all categories, offered better range and durability. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat, which replaced the Buffalo in Navy service, demonstrated far superior combat survivability despite similar performance specifications. Production numbers reveal another problem. Only 509 Buffaloes were built total, compared to over 7,800 Wildcats. Limited production meant limited improvements in support infrastructure. Field performance data exposed serious gaps between claims and reality. The Buffalo's Wright R1820 engine proved unreliable in tropical conditions. Overheating was chronic. Pilots reported frequent engine failures during high-power climbs. The two-stage supercharger, meant to provide high-altitude performance, malfunctioned regularly. Structural issues emerged under combat stress. The airframe, designed to Navy carrier standards, was actually overbuilt and heavy. However, this didn't translate to durability under battle damage. Fuel tanks, even when modified with self-sealing technology, remained vulnerable. Hydraulic systems frequently failed after minor hits. The Buffalo's operational availability rate in Pacific squadrons averaged below 50%. For every 2 Buffaloes assigned, only 1 was typically flyable. This compared poorly to the 70% availability rates of better-maintained aircraft types. Declassified combat reports paint a bleak picture. Marine pilot Captain Philip White wrote in his after-action report from Midway, "The Buffalo is hopelessly outclassed. Any commander who orders pilots to fly this aircraft against Zeros is sending them to die." RAF pilots in Singapore used even stronger language. One Australian pilot described it as flying a brick against hummingbirds. American test pilot evaluations from 1942, conducted after combat data arrived, concluded the Buffalo was inferior to current enemy fighters in speed, climb, maneuverability, and armament effectiveness. The Navy's own evaluation recommended immediate withdrawal from frontline service. However, Finnish pilot reports told a different story. They praised the Buffalo's sturdy construction, adequate firepower, and good visibility. The contradiction demands explanation. Mission success rates reveal the harsh truth. Buffalo escort missions frequently failed to protect bombers. Interception missions typically resulted in the interceptors being intercepted. Of 22 documented Buffalo combat missions in the Philippines and Singapore campaigns, only 3 achieved their primary objectives without significant losses. Fighter sweep missions were virtually suicidal. The Buffalo lacked the speed to escape unfavorable engagements and the performance to dominate favorable ones. Maintenance demands were excessive. The Buffalo required approximately 6 maintenance hours for every flight hour, double the desired ratio. Engine changes were frequent. Hydraulic system repairs consumed significant hangar time. In forward combat areas with limited facilities, maintenance backlogs grounded aircraft for weeks. Parts availability was problematic. With limited production, spare parts supply chains never matured. Squadrons cannibalized damaged aircraft to keep others flying. This maintenance nightmare contributed directly to low operational readiness. Let's break down myth versus fact systematically. Myth: fast and agile modern fighter. Reality: overweight and sluggish in operational configuration. Myth: heavily armed with superior firepower. Reality: 4.50 caliber machine guns were adequate but not superior. Japanese aircraft often had cannons. Myth: robust and survivable design. Reality: vulnerable to battle damage despite heavy construction. Myth: successfully served multiple air forces. Reality: only Finland achieved success, all others experienced disasters. Myth: capable carrier fighter. Reality: removed from carriers before seeing combat due to recognized inadequacies. Myth: lost due to pilot inexperience. Reality: even experienced pilots couldn't overcome performance deficits. Myth: comparable to contemporary fighters. Reality: outclassed by Japanese, German, and even some Allied designs. To be fair, the Buffalo did have genuine strengths. Its construction was solid, providing good protection for the pilot in the cockpit area. The aircraft offered excellent visibility, with a bubble canopy that allowed pilots to scan for threats effectively. This was a significant advantage in situational awareness. The Buffalo's armament, while not exceptional, was workable. 4.50 caliber machine guns provided reasonable firepower against unarmored targets. The guns were reliable and well-positioned for convergence. In specific situations, particularly against inferior opposition, the Buffalo could perform adequately. Finnish operations demonstrated this clearly. Against older Soviet aircraft flown by less experienced pilots, the Buffalo's advantages outweighed its weaknesses. The aircraft was also relatively easy to fly for competent pilots. Its handling characteristics were predictable, and it didn't have dangerous quirks. For training purposes and transitioning pilots from biplanes, it served acceptably. The Buffalo's weaknesses were fundamental and numerous. Speed was inadequate against modern opposition. Pilots couldn't catch enemy aircraft when pursuing or escape when threatened. This single limitation was often fatal. Climb rate was poor, preventing Buffaloes from gaining altitude advantage. In air combat, altitude equals energy equals survival. The Buffalo consistently fought from a disadvantage. Maneuverability, while acceptable in absolute terms, was inferior to Japanese aircraft. In turning engagements, Buffalo pilots faced inevitable defeat. The only winning move was not to turn, but the Buffalo lacked the speed to dictate engagement terms. Range limitations restricted tactical flexibility. Buffaloes couldn't escort bombers on extended missions or conduct long-range patrols effectively. This reduced their strategic value significantly. Durability under combat damage was disappointing despite heavy construction. Critical systems failed easily. Engine fires were common after hits. Many pilots ditched or bilayed out from damaged Buffaloes that might have brought them home. Timing advantages. The Buffalo entered service during a transitional period. In 1939 and early 1940, it compared favorably to older biplane fighters and early monoplanes. For a brief window, it represented progress. By 1941, rapid developments had left it obsolete. Weak opponents. Finnish success came against Soviet aircraft and pilots that were, frankly, inferior during that period. Soviet fighters in 1941-1942 included outdated models flown by pilots with limited training. The kill ratios reflected this mismatch more than Buffalo capability. Finnish pilots were experienced, skilled, and fighting defensive operations close to their bases. Propaganda boost. American pre-war confidence demanded positive narratives. Early promotional materials emphasized potential rather than proven performance. Once war revealed the truth, institutional momentum kept the Buffalo in service longer than justified. Survivor bias. We remember the Finnish victories vividly because they're dramatic and impressive. We forget the hundreds of Buffalo pilots who died in less memorable circumstances across the Pacific. The exceptional story overshadowed the typical tragedy. The Buffalo was a mediocre design that arrived at a terrible moment. It represented 1938 thinking meeting 1941 reality. Not intentionally bad, but comprehensively inadequate for the war it actually fought. The Brewster Buffalo was neither the promising fighter of legend nor simply a flying coffin. The truth is more nuanced. It was an adequate aircraft for 1939 that became obsolete by 1941. Rapid wartime development left it behind. The Buffalo's real failure wasn't inherent design disaster, but rather the impossibility of upgrading fast enough to match accelerating combat demands. When properly employed within its limitations by skilled pilots against inferior opposition, as Finland demonstrated, the Buffalo could succeed. But those conditions rarely existed in Pacific combat. American, British, and Dutch pilots faced superior Japanese aircraft, often with numerical disadvantage, and usually without the extensive combat experience Finnish pilots possessed. Historically, the Buffalo should be remembered as a cautionary tale about pre-war assumptions meeting wartime reality. It represents the challenges of transitional technology and the brutal learning curve of early World War II. The Buffalo was America's harsh lesson that good intentions and adequate peacetime standards don't guarantee wartime success. The aircraft's true significance lies not in its combat record, but in what it taught Allied air forces. The Buffalo's failures directly influenced designs that followed. The F-4F Wildcat, F-6F Hellcat, and P-38 Lightning all benefited from lessons learned through Buffalo operations. The myth survives because the Finnish exception is so compelling. 32-to-1 kill ratios make irresistible stories. We want to believe equipment doesn't determine outcomes, that skill and tactics can overcome material disadvantages. Sometimes that's true. Usually it's not. The myth also persists because admitting complete failure is uncomfortable. It's easier to qualify to say, it could have worked if, rather than it simply didn't work. Remember the Buffalo honestly. Remember the pilots who died flying an inadequate aircraft into hopeless situations. Remember that warfare punishes outdated equipment regardless of courage. And remember that one exceptional success story doesn't change a pattern of failure. So that's the truth about the Brewster Buffalo. A legend built on Finnish success, a reality written in Pacific losses. It's a reminder that aviation history is more complex than simple good or bad labels. Now I want to hear from you. What other World War II aircraft do you think are overrated or misunderstood? Drop your answers in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into aviation history, hit that like button and subscribe for more myth-busting content. Ring the bell so you don't miss our next video where we're examining another controversial wartime aircraft. Until next time, fly safe and question everything.